what I want to start with is the need for the library staff's own professional development for sound doctrine and theological education in two areas. And I'm going to be showing you free resources. I'm going to take a quick detour for a second. By the end of this summer, I'm going to cobble together some really well-vetted open access resources and I'll distribute it through ABTEN if I could. I didn't want to allude to, but I'll just mention it really briefly that in August, ATLA will launch a new website. Its kind of code name is Eureka, a Greek word. I found it. And it's going to be an open access, open discovery site to locate, make discoverable, prioritize for digitization purposes, archives in religion, special collections, denominational histories around the world, many of which are really precious and in jeopardy in sub-Saharan Africa. Make those available so that we know where they all are, and that researchers could use the metadata to do that research. Some of that will be digitized, but at least they'll be discoverable now. That Eureka site will include all of what I'm talking about today that is dispersed on the ATLA site. So by the end of August, I'll be able to show you something in which it presents all this information in one easily found place. So these free resources are twofold. One is for the continuing ed of theological librarianship. So a lot of librarians aren't trained in librarianship. Atlas started a series to help kind of create that training in kind of self-discovery, self-learning. So I'm going to show you those. And then the second are free resources, again, for you as librarians, but also the faculty. So these slides I'm going to allude to tomorrow in more of a formal presentation. These slides are for you to distribute to the faculty, but it's also important for theological librarians or librarians at theological institutions to even if you're not trained in theology, to know about it. Because you're going to be called upon for student services, you're going to be called upon to help your faculty, you need to be able to be involved in curricular reform. And so I want you to know that some of these resources are free. Use them for your own knowledge base, but also share them with your faculty. So next slide. So as I said, this first handbook, this series is called the Theological Librarian's Handbook. I'll just grab my notes here too. The Theological Librarian's Handbook is a multi-volume, we have 5 volumes right now, guide to theological librarianship intended for library staff who do not possess professional training, but who work in theological librarians all over the world. That was the whole point of this, and it was in many ways a brainchild of Kelly Campbell. It provides free and self-paced library training written by theological librarians working in different types of theological librarians and institutions around the world. So it's also, these volumes are contextualized. That QR code will send you right to the main page in which you can see all the volumes that have been published. Next slide. So I'm going to go through each volume just so you know what they are. On the right is the table of contents. I'm sure you can't read it, but again, these slides are for you to download and you'll be able to see them. So the first, sorry, I can't use my thumb. I understand how important an opposable thumb is now. So volume 1 in the series, it's Introduction to Theological Libraries. Introduces the reader to the world of theological librarianship and answers the basic questions: what are theological libraries? What is their purpose? What types? And the role in the community in which they operate. Also, who are theological librarians? What are their possible career paths? What are theological libraries like across the globe? So you'll find in this volume, chapter by chapter, a look at different regions around the world. And then how are they organized and serve their communities and really serve humanity. Next slide. This is Administration, Volume 2, Administration in Theological Libraries. This provides models for the administration of theological libraries, and which vary widely around the world. And this is the kind of resource that you can use for your institution, wherever it is. And again, this is going to be contextualized for the African continent. So commonly, theological librarians must develop an internal administration of policies. You're going to hear about that from Kelly in a moment. Procedures, goals in relationship to collection management, staffing, using volunteers, planning, reporting, budgeting, as well as administering external relationships to a broader institution, library consortia, and other stakeholders. The targeted audience for this volume includes those starting a new theology library or beginning a new position in administration. So again, if this is the kind of perfect fit for many institutions that are trying to bring together a library for the first time. Thanks. This one is collection development, and Kelly in the next video will cover this in much more depth. But again, you can both use her video, but use this volume. Again, it's free. And this volume introduces the reader to collection development in theological libraries and answers these basic questions. How does one understand one's community in order to serve its formation needs? 2, what are the principles of decision making about resources, what to choose, what to not choose? How are these expressed in a useful policy development? Also asks, how does commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism shape local collection practices? And then last, how can collaborative strategies be used to provide access to reference collections, special collections, and electronic collections? Next volume. This is preservation in collections in theological libraries. This is something that ATLA is deeply concerned, knowing that a lot of special archives are in danger. So this volume deals with maximizing the longevity of physical materials that librarians and archivists commonly collect, maintaining appropriate levels of temperature and humidity, so it gets into quite a bit of detail for storage of materials, implementing simple, affordable practices and preventive measures to protect collections and stay prepared for emergencies, respond to specific preservation challenges such as mold outbreak, and digitizing print materials and how this relates to preserving originals. And the last volume we have 2 volumes in the works, but the last volume that's printed is Management Theological Libraries. This volume introduces the readers to the topic of management theological libraries, answers these basic questions. What is the distinction between administration, leadership, and management? What principles of management are important to consider in theological libraries? And how does one successfully manage different operations and projects within them? And I got to come back to this 1 second. Great. So now, what I wanted to show you, and I'm going to present 4 categories of, what I asked my staff to do is take our religion database and look for all, especially the open access, freely available Baptist and evangelical journals in 4 categories that you'll see. Next slide. And so each slide is going to have, I'm going to actually walk you through these 4 categories, tell you a little bit about ones that are really, we think you'll want to pay special attention to. And the last 2 slides are actually 1 slide, wouldn't fit on 1 slide, but it lists all these journals that I'm going to walk you through, and it gives you the URL. And that URL will take you to that journal site in which you can have access to the journal for free. So the first slide here is, in the first category, is biblical studies and theology journals. And you see some of the journals are the Detroit Baptist Seminary Journal, Midwestern Journal of Theology, Southern Baptist Journal of Theology, Stellenbosch Theological Journal. Next slide. This category is on preaching, teaching, and ministry journals. Again, you don't have to, these slides will be available for you with each URL, so you'll have access to all of this. The preaching, teaching, and ministry journals includes Journal of Family and Community Ministries, Journal of Baptist Theology and Ministry, Journal of European Baptist Studies. Next slide. These are the journals that we located on apologetics and world religion. Includes the Ghana Journal of Religion and Theology, Journal for the Study of the Religions of Africa and its Diaspora, Pentecostalism, Charismaticism, and Neo-Prophetic Movements Journal, and the Annual Review of Islam in Africa. And then the fourth category are specifically African journals, Conspectus, Ghana Journal, Ilorin, Journal of Religious Studies, Journal of Mother Tongue, Biblical Hermeneutics, and Theology, Miscellanea, Verbum et Ecclesia. So we can, go right to the next slide. And if you could toggle between this slide and the next one. So these are the two slides that gather together a lot of information on all the journals in the four categories that I just mentioned. And you won't be able to see it here, but if you download it, you'll have the URL. Go straight to that, and you'll have access to those journals.
So there are active links.
They're active links. Yeah, none of these are broken, and none of these are dead. So I want to draw your attention to several of the key journals we think are on that list. Go right back. Yep, perfect. That we think the staff was thinking about how to support biblical scholarship, enrich preaching ministries, and connect your context with global conversations in religion, theology, biblical studies. So first I want to mention popular journals within the Baptist tradition, such as the Detroit Baptist Seminary Journal, Midwestern Journal of Theology, Southern Baptist Journal of Theology. All of these offer rigorous scholarship grounded in Baptist and evangelical convictions. Equally valuable are journals with strong African roots and contextual insights, the Acta Theologica, Stellenbosch Theological Journal, both based in South Africa. They provide space for theological reflection that speaks directly into African realities. Also, Historia Ecclesiastica, which includes vital research on African church history, and Miscellanea, which connects mission studies with African challenges and opportunities. And I especially want to recommend journals like Verbum et Ecclesia and Scriptura, explores biblical interpretation and theology from within African hermeneutical frameworks. They offer models for community-centered readings of Scripture. Kenyan and broader African scholarship is well represented in titles like the Journal of Mother Tongue, Biblical Hermeneutics, Ilorin. So these are not only resources to learn from in terms of a librarian's own professional development, but to give to your faculty and to recommend, especially those journals, recommend that these are journals that your faculty should write for. Lastly, journals such as the Ghana Journal of Religion and Theology, Journal for the Study of Religions of Africa and its Diaspora, Annual Review of Islam in Africa are essential to understanding, obviously, the religious currents in Africa. And these journals provide scholarship that is both contextual and central to the witness of Baptists in Kenya. So again, this slide and the next is a ton of information on these two related slides. Use the active links to go right to those journals. Use them for yourself, give them to the students at your institution, and please distribute them to the faculty. Next slide. So the Atlas Digital Library is a really powerful, freely accessible resource that brings together over 133,000 digital archival items from libraries, religious institutions, and organizations worldwide, with special focus on materials related to religion and theology, including more than 10,000 items explicitly connected to the Baptist faith. Platform offers direct access, so it links you to that institution's archive, to a range of historical manuscripts, primary texts, church records, sermons, photographs, artifacts that document the global Baptist tradition and its evolution over time. Next slide. Oh, and I'll mention some of those in RIM, the ADL, Atlas Digital Library, include Hong Kong Baptist University, Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. They all have their archives linked into it. And then this slide is, RIM is Research and Ministry is RIM. This is another free resource on atla.com. This is a trustworthy, open access resource designed to support global scholarly communication, including for African audiences. RIM provides free access to robust database of theses and dissertations. These are institutions that wanted to be sure that the thesis and the dissertation that was finished at that institution was more widely available across seminaries, divinity schools. It comprises nearly 4,000 works related to Baptist research alone. So one of those issues that when you advise on a dissertation is make sure no one has done that work before. This is a great resource for that. Notably, of these 190 of them are focused explicitly on the Baptist faith in Africa, reflecting both depth, diversity of research available. And some of the same contributing institutions, Eastern Baptist, Northern Baptist in the U.S., Midwestern Baptist, Southwestern Baptist, Golden Gate, Southern Baptist, and New Orleans Baptist all have their thesis collection there. I really want to emphasize too, though, one of the things, one of the most important tools that a library should have is to have easy access to something. You don't have to have too many clicks. The hard thing is that you really can't find these on Atla. They're really hard to find. You have to go through a crazy website, and that's why we wanted Eureka. So all of this, along with thousands of more archives, are going to be available. But all of these will be in the beta launch in August, and I'll be sure that ABTEN has the link to this site called, well, it won't be called Eureka, but it'll be called something.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
I'm going to show my ignorance in asking this question. But is this, I'll speak loud. I said I'm going to show my ignorance in asking
For the
this.
online people, you
Online, you gotta-
we can hear, the online people can't hear without.
Oh, I thought you meant it didn't matter.
No.
Just talk. So my question is, research and ministry, RIM, is this just like essentially another version of ProQuest, or does this add ProQuest in with it?
These typically aren't in ProQuest. So there's a lot of institutions that don't have the resources in ProQuest. I won't go into this, but you could ask me at another time, because I'll be talking about publishing, is I recommend not putting your dissertation in ProQuest, because publishers will, there's a lot of dissertations that should be a book and more widely distributed and not just available through ProQuest because people can't access it. If your dissertation is in ProQuest, and you say you want to turn your dissertation into a book, and the publishers, the first thing they're going to ask you is it in ProQuest? And when you say yes, they say no thank you, because there's no point in publishing that dissertation. That really cuts you out of your first publication. Lastly, so the next slide, on this part, I really want to emphasize that you don't have to be an ATLA member to receive all the information we produce. We stopped putting things behind a firewall, a member firewall, so you can get information alerts, you can get deep dives into specific areas in which the ATLA databases cover, many of which are open access. So that URL, oops, go to the next slide, sorry. This a QR code will take you right to a page to sign up for all kinds of alerts. Please do that whether you're a faculty member, an administrator, or a student, or obviously a librarian. In many ways, you'll have as much access to resources that you know, unless you're planning to go to the ATLET annual meeting. This is going to get you the kind of resources that you want. And once we have this website, you'll have easy access to all the open access materials. Next slide. So I'm not going to cover this. I'm going to skip this one. Right here, I'm also, I'm going to talk a great deal of, not a great deal, but in more depth tomorrow about this. Really want to get into some of the dangers of open access and the dangers of AI. And I'm going to, it's not just about hallucinations, but it's the fact that in many cases, hallucinations aren't a bug. They're not misinformation. They're not unintentional. It's not a bad algorithm, but they're a feature. And by feature, I mean AI is trained on human behavior, neural networks, artificial neural networks, the biological model for LLMs. And so it's now trained on the massive human information. And humans deceive, humans lie. And AI picks that up as a feature of human behavior. So I'll mention there's some just fascinating studies on artificial neural networks written not by science fiction writers, but by the folks that actually built the LLMs that tell you, and they give you the algorithms and the coding that shows that some of these aren't just a made-up citation, but it's intending to mislead you, intentionally trying to mislead you. Very different than a simple hallucination. I totally understand, and that in certain contexts, resources are golden, and you don't have many of them. But open access and AI is not a simple solution. And needing to go back to the basics of trying to understand how to confirm a citation is critical to what librarians do for their students, how they help their faculty, and certainly what faculty teach their students. So I'll emphasize this tomorrow, but AI and open access, all because something is free. They say if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And remember, if it's a feature, not a bug, then there's a real danger. I was telling someone that I don't want to go down a bunny hole, but one of my first jobs was I was a fact checker for a major publisher, Scribner, Simon Schuster, Doubleday. And your job was to, as a fact checker, no one does this anymore because it's too expensive. You'd have to put a little circle in the line, on every line that had a fact, event, place name, person, quotation. And your job, it was tedious, was to confirm every fact. And you couldn't put a mark in that circle unless you confirmed every fact. That's what scholars are supposed to do. That's what students are supposed to do. You don't assume, we couldn't assume that because it was quoted with quotation marks that it was an accurate citation. We had to go back to the original source to find it. This is why going back to the basics for open access and AI is critical, and you can't just accept the fact that you saw it. You have to confirm it. So you can just walk through, but ATLET tries to provide as much really good AI information, and we're trying to lead the way in theological librarianship for AI. So it's not to say that I'm anti-AI. All I'm saying is that back to the basics. AI doesn't make your job any easier. It just brings you back to what you need to do as a librarian and as a research scholar, and as someone teaching students how to discern, because they enter the real world and they're going to be facing all kinds of misinformation. I'll talk about this tomorrow. And then lastly, before I turn it over, I just want to mention this because maybe we could come back to this if we have time. But it's the need for faculty and administrators, not to put you on the spot,
That's fine.
to support the librarians. Find resources for them because they're critical to the student's experience. They're even part of spiritual formation because information literacy, theological literacy, if you don't learn it formally, you're going to go out there and spread misinformation. And spreading misinformation in religion and theology is as dangerous as spreading it in science and medicine. So I would love to hear in the end, or maybe we could start a conversation about how that collaboration at seminaries that focus on tradition, Baptist, is actually more important than in any other context in theological education. You have to collaborate because you don't want to be misaligned with the resources of your institution and the curriculum of your institution. You heard that earlier today. Regularly assess collections and curricula with faculty to ensure alignment with sound doctrine and responsiveness to changing needs. You kind of heard that earlier too. Faculty and librarians should work together to integrate library resources in the curriculum, foster information literacy, advocate for library collaboration. The faculty as a primary guide, as a teacher, as a professor, as an author, but librarians support that need. And last, libraries are not just repositories, but active partners in teaching and learning and research. So I understand. And it is sometimes humbling to come from the US, where there's more resources, although that's changing. But to cut out a primary part of a student's experience and a faculty's ability to do research will not serve the needs of congregations and the church in the future. So I don't have a simple answer, but I accept that conversation and collaboration is critical to finding a solution.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to Dr. Kelly's presentation on collection development, especially from the viewpoint of a theological librarian who is also an accreditor.
Greetings. I wish I could be with you in person, but unfortunately I can't. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about a document that provides sound doctrine for libraries. I know the theme of the conference this year is sound doctrine. Ms. Schatz asked me to talk with you about the collection development policy. Some of you may have a collection development policy, but some of you may not. I know a lot of times the collection development policy gets pushed over to the side in all the busyness that happens as we're taking care of students and faculty. But the collection development policy is a guideline. It's an active document, and it's a document that helps you provide sound doctrine to the way that the library is running. One of the other things that I do in volunteering is I volunteer for a lot of accreditation visits. And when I come to a school, one of the first documents I ask for is the collection development policy. And part of the reasons for this is it shows me that the librarian has really sat down and thought about their role in developing the collection. Not just putting books on the shelves, but having a thoughtful, engaged conversation with administration and with faculty and with other librarians about how to develop the collection that they're responsible for. So we're going to spend a few moments talking about a collection development policy and some of the features of it. As well, I put some sample collection development policies up in the Dropbox that Ms. Schatz can provide for you as well. Several years ago, I decided to change the name of our collection development policy, and there were reasons for this. Our current one is the Collection Development, Management, and Access Policy. Not only as librarians do we develop a policy, but we manage it. We select, we deselect, we arrange, we organize, we catalog, which is all management, and we also provide access. Access could be access to the physical building, but it can also be accessed to digital collections as well. So I felt like a collection development policy was overarching, but by adding the words management and access, it really described better what the policy does for me in my particular context. The collection development policy should start with a purpose, and the purpose is why the policy exists. This needs to be clearly communicated to faculty and to administration, that the librarian understands why the library is important, why the library is a partner in the educational process at the institutions. The second part is the definition of collection management. As librarians, we understand when we say collection development, but for non-librarians, they don't know what we mean. They just think we sit in the library and read books all day, or we just purchase books. They don't understand the work that goes behind developing, managing, and accessing a collection. One of the terms that's been coming out since COVID in librarianship is talking about vocational awe. And that vocational awe talks about how we are so good at our jobs, everyone thinks it's so easy, and they have vocational awe because we do our job so well. Having a collection development, manage, and access policy helps administrators and faculty understand that things don't happen by magic or that they're not just there, that there's a lot of work and hours that go behind what is in our collection. Then the next section of the policy has general collection development, management, and access guidelines. These guidelines are very important because they help define the role that you as the theological librarian have within the institution. The first one is the responsibility for selection. I know in some contexts, some schools have faculty be on selection committees or library committees. I personally don't like that. I think you, as a librarian, are trained professional, and you should be able to make the decisions about what goes on the shelf and what doesn't go on the shelf. You can always consult with administrators or faculty, but as your role as a professional, you need to be able to make the final decision for that. Part B is the scope and the context. How far and how wide is this collection going to be? You know, years ago, libraries covered wide ranges. Big universities, research universities had all, like Oxford, had all kinds of collections. But there's only so much we can do in the context we're in. So it's talking about what major theological disciplines are you going to cover? What areas are you going to cover? In my particular context, I'm at a Presbyterian, a PCUSA school. So not only will I cover Bible and theology and different topics, but I will also cover items from the Presbyterian perspective. So the scope and context helps define the area that you're going to cover, and it also has budget impact, and it also has selection impact. So if you've got a really clear defined scope and context, then when it comes to gift books that come in, you can say it doesn't fit our scope and context. It doesn't make that decision become personal. It makes it based on a policy. The next is the level of the collection, and you need to think about this. In my particular context, I have doctoral programs, but not a PhD program. So I don't acquire resources comprehensively. I don't have someone who's spending their PhD studying about New Testament. Now, I have New Testament resources up to a master's level and even up to a doctor of ministry level, but that's different than collecting all the way up to a PhD level. So you need to define the level of collection that you're going to collect. The fourth is languages. In my particular context, most of my resources are in English. In your particular context, most of them may be in French with a little bit of English. So again, it's saying that you've thought about how you're building this collection with intention and with purpose. The fifth one is formats, and this has changed a lot in my library career for sure. We still do buy a lot of print. Ebook is probably our second format that we do the most. It may be different in your library, but again, when decisions get made, oh, I want to buy this ebook that costs double what a print book does, you have a policy to back up that decision rather than just a preference. The next one talks about ownership versus access. There are some things that I own in our library, and there's some things that I only access or I subscribe to. In these days, I think you need a balance of that. There are some certain texts that you want to own, so you always have access to them. But there may be things that you only want to purchase access to. And I know it can be challenging in different parts of what access you can get and what access you can't. But you need to define what you want to own and what you want to access. In my particular library, I have a children's library. So I have a section that comes next that talks about the children's library and why we have it. Not a lot of theological schools have a children's library. So again, it needs to be described in the access policy. And then the next section talks about gifts. And I think particularly for your context, you understand gifts as well as anyone. Currently, my library does not collect gifts. We do not accept gifts. We send them to the Theological Book Network or other places. In your context, you may want to accept gifts. But we've all received gifts that are retired pastors' libraries, and they're not the research quality of what we need to be putting in our library. So you need to be able to say, Dr. Smith, we will accept your gift, but we have the right to do what we need to do with it. Because there's always cultural and political decisions when you have a gift like that come. But you can say, we don't accept gifts, or we will accept this gift because this gift is made from a scholar who has a lot of research that's unique, that we want to keep in our library and make it available to the rest of the world. The next section talks about deselection. And deselection is just a fancy word for weeding. I know a lot of times you've got things on your shelves, and it's kind of a balance that you have to do with accreditation. You want enough materials to show that you can support the curriculum that's happening in your library, but you also don't want shelves filled of things that never get used or are so outdated that they're giving the wrong information. So this paragraph really describes what deselection is and who has the right to make the deselection. I think professional librarians have that ability and that responsibility. Again, you can always pull things from the New Testament section. You could go ask a New Testament faculty member, here's what I think needs to go, what do you think? And that way you're building partnerships and collaborations with faculty. But again, the last word comes from you. Then we have intellectual freedom. And intellectual freedom is going to be different in the different contexts that you find yourselves. But in mine particularly, we want to be sure that we support intellectual freedom, that students have the right to explore what they want to explore. And I'm a big proponent of this. If they can explore and question things while they're in their seminary, how are they going to do that when they graduate? And then the last section here talks about evaluation. How do we evaluate the collection? Sometimes you look at the age of the items. Sometimes you look at the use of the item. Has it ever circulated? Sometimes you look at the growth. Church planning for a while was a growth that was being published a whole lot, and that's kind of slowed down. But there may be other areas that are coming up, and you buy a bunch in that area is happening. The next section is the content of library materials and challenges to the appropriate of materials. And I know this is more common in public libraries, but I definitely wanted to have it in my theological library. In any library that you're in, from conservative to liberal, there's always a scale. You will have people along this scale. Even if your library is very conservative, there's ultra-conservative and there's liberal conservative. And so our role is to provide different perspectives of sound doctrine for our users, faculty and students. But there's always the chance that you have someone who disagrees with something in the library. Instead of having to react to that, you want something in your policy that says this is what happens if someone does do that. You need the steps outlined. You need the policy clear. So everyone's just not acting off the emotions or the surprise or the concern if something happens. Here's a policy of what we do. Here's a process of what we do so that it's systematically evaluated and looked at. In my particular context, I have an archive. Some of you may have archives in your collections. And so I have a section about the archives. Again, the purpose of it, why we collect, what we collect, and what depth of what we have. So we do keep the archives as there. The other piece that I have, which is going to be updated this next year, is I have a faculty papers collecting guidelines. In our particular library, we collect faculty papers, and I'm saying faculty papers broadly, because I do have some faculty that give us their papers, but I do have one faculty member that all of his work is in video. But this kind of gives an idea of what we want to collect from faculty when they leave the institution, if they retire from the institution. We want to make sure and archive or preserve their intellectual work. And so we have an attachment here that talks about what we collect. It's very important because when we've approached faculty, so many are surprised. They're like, somebody would like to read what I wrote about? And we're like, yes, you've been doing research that needs to be shared with the rest of the world. But it kind of gives an idea of why we collect what we do, what we collect. For example, we don't collect their syllabi. Very selectively would we put syllabi into our papers. But it gives them an idea of why we collect and that type of thing. So we do have a section in that as well. And this is probably maybe a little bit American-centered, but we do have an attachment talking about the framework for equity, diversity, and inclusion descriptions and subject headings. In my particular context, I'm in a theological library in the southern part of the United States, which has African American students who were impacted by slavery. And so we try to keep up with the current terms. And so instead of saying a slave, you say an enslaved person. And so we have a section in that. I think the way that this would be applicable in your context is from different tribes or different folklore or different cultural contexts that you need to be able to put words into your collection to help people access it and to be able to find what they're looking for. And then the last piece that we have in here talks about our rare books. We do have some rare books in our special collections, and so we developed a separate policy for that because I don't have the resources to have a rare book librarian. I don't have a conservation person who puts books back together again. And so we wanted to say, you know, if someone wants to give us a big collection of rare books, which someone did donate several years ago, we worked with another library who had those resources to make sure that those items were preserved there. They could have come to us, but they wouldn't have been accessed. They wouldn't have been preserved as well. And we wanted to have them long-term somewhere for people to use rather than just having them sitting on our shelves. So that's a little bit of walking through my collection development, manage, and access policy. I hope that I've provided some guidestones for you. Again, if you don't have one, I would encourage you to get one. The other piece of this is I review this every 3 years. And once I review it, then I take it to the faculty for a vote. Now, does the faculty ever read it? No. But the faculty have had an opportunity to read it, and that's very important to accreditors when they come in. If you don't take it to the faculty, administration needs to know about it. And again, it's saying that there's a broader buy-in, that this is not just something that the library does. This is an institutional document, and this is important because it guides how we develop the collection, how we manage it, and how we access it. So again, I put a copy of it in the Dropbox. I'll put some other copies of different ones so that you can see. I know in the discussion, if there's specific questions that you have, Deanna would be able to share those with me as well as Maggie, and I'd be glad to answer those with you on WhatsApp or through email as well. So thank you.
So this is really going to be a relatively quick overview of this topic. It's going to be, I focus when I talk to people, I do a lot of helping people find the articles that they want when they're in a position where they can't locate them. And so, but there's so much out there. And for me, open access is one of the world's great things. And we certainly understand predatory journals, and we also know that anyone can create a website. And we certainly have to teach our students how to discern valid information. I think that's one of the most important things that faculty and librarians do, is help students understand that just because it's on the web does not make it accurate information. It has to come from accurate sources. Okay, next slide. So it's just going to be peer-reviewed. So I'm going to focus on where we find what I consider accurate information, and it's going to focus mostly on journals. I'm not going to talk so much about websites today because I think most of us understand, and that's something that you can work with your students. Next slide. So these are a few. Now remember, you're going to get all of this. You don't need to be taking screenshots or copying notes. All of this is going to come. But I want to focus on these open access databases particularly, and we're going to look at some of them a little closer. Some of them, Cielo is really science, but it does have some articles in religion. It does do South African journals, and it has some in different languages. Frequently I get requests for I work in Francophone, I work in Lusophone, I work in Spanish. Where are articles for me? And so that's one. And then we'll talk briefly about Hinari, which is part of Research for Life, because some of you are in university schools that have religious studies, and this is something that for your broad base, because I know that I met Dr. Mbewe, and his school is a university that covers education and agriculture and other things. And so Research for Life is a very useful tool for that. And then open access. Everybody's heard of Google Scholar, and I'm going to call on Dr. Kutzko to talk about Bible Odyssey and some other programs for later, just when we get down to it. There's a slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just what the Open Access Digital Theological Library is, and this is the one, Deanna, isn't the one you can have free access, but if you pay, you get more. But there are free information. Next slide. And so this is just some examples. I did Baptist Theological Education in Sub-Saharan Africa, and these are just two examples of articles that came up through that particular database. Next slide. Now, this is one that I've been following for many years. It's Globe Ethics, and it comes out of Europe, and it's ecumenical. So this is not a sound doctrine within this one. It's going to focus, if you look for, I looked up Sound Baptist Doctrine, but this is a site that's going to cover everything from Roman Catholicism probably to Baha'i and Islam and other things. So I put, this is the website, what it looks like. I put in Sound Baptist Doctrine. Next slide. And here are just the three that would fit on my screenshot. And you see Doctrine of the Church, Anabaptists, and we're all very interested, if you're interested in church history and how the Anabaptists were so miserably treated, and then Russian Baptists. And so just examples. Next slide. And now here's Research for Life. Now this is something that's of particular interest to those of you who have already expanded your curricula to include non-theological topics, or you're considering it, because if you're in the majority world at certain levels of income as World Bank judges it, you can get this free. It's not free if you have a little bit higher level of income, but they have graded prices. But it's just something you need to know about. Next slide. Now, this is when I work mostly, at this point in my career, I work primarily with medical and surgical education. But PubMed and PubMed Central are from our National Library of Medicine, but in fact, there's a great deal of information related to religion, theology, chaplaincy, faith-based interventions, and you certainly need to know. And PubMed Central, I have struggled helping my people, even in the United States. PubMed has many articles, some are open access, but many are proprietary and are behind paywalls. If you're in Research for Life, you can reach more of them because that's one of their gateways. But everything in PubMed Central is open access. Next slide. And these are just a couple of things. I picked hospital chaplains in Sub-Saharan Africa because many of our theological institutions, hospital chaplaincy is a very important area of training. And these were just a couple. there's many articles in there that I think you will find. And your people, every medical decision, literally globally, has a faith-based, I'm trying to think of the word, influence. Persons' faiths influence everything they do in the medical community. And many times pastors are like one of the lines that people go to when they have health issues, because they want to go to someone they think that knows something. So I think it's important for pastors and theological schools to understand that this is a good resource if you have these health issues. And the churches are very often very heavily involved in helping their communities seek health care. Next slide. This is one of my favorite databases, African Journals Online. I met this in 2008 in Durban. I went to an international library conference. I'd never heard of it, but this has now become one of my favorite databases for Africa because, number one, many of the journals in African Journals Online, this is the only place you will find them. They are not indexed in other major databases that you will be using. And so next slide. And many of the journals, they have everything. This is a general database. It's not medical or theological or education. It's all the African journals that AJOL thought were worthy of being indexed. And so I did Baptist Doctrine, and there's Karl Barth came up in African Christianity, maintaining an evangelical faith in a face of decadent culture of democracy, and then Pentecostal millenarianism and underdevelopment in Africa. So this is one that I really hope that you will teach your faculty and students to use. Next slide. This is just a whole thousands of open access journals. Next slide. And they're classified. You can pull up subject areas and see there's doctrinal theology that you can go into this database. And it has many religion and Christian, and I even cut some of them off, subject matters. But this is a very important one to know, because to me, anything that you can get open access. Now, of course, you have to make some judgments, because I don't know that they judge the sound doctrine in the journals that they index, but they do try to make available, let you know what is out there that you can get full text without any cost. Next slide. And then here is some samples from it. Yoruba and Black theologies. This was from the doctrinal theology one, and then engaging theology and theological education in the majority world. Okay, next slide. All right, now I'm going to ask Dr. Kutzko to come back and tell you a little bit about this organization that he has been closely related to.
So yeah, I was executive director of SBL for almost 13 years, and ICI, International Cooperation Initiative, was a really important program that I deeply cared about. I inherited it, but we tried to expand it for 12 years. I really feel that we still didn't get word out about it. So what ICI has is, if you go to the SBL website to that URL, if you're coming from almost any Southern Hemisphere country, based upon GDP and World Bank statistics, you'll have free access to everything that SBL has ever published. Every book, every textbook, a series like Writings from the Ancient World, primary text, Writings from the Greco-Roman world, and all the journals, including JBL, the flagship journal for biblical studies. So you'll have access to that premier academic publishing program just by going to the Internet ICI program. So I've been trying to be an evangelist for letting people know that this resource is out there. I also negotiated with a number of publishers like Westminster, John Knox, some smaller publishers that would provide some of their resources for free. But you can download every article or book and it's DRM free. So you can distribute that to your students and use that in the classroom. We reckoned with the fact that we knew some of that stuff was going to get pirated, but we would do more good than harm ultimately. So that's ICI, spread the word.
Next slide.
And then Bible Odyssey is near and dear to my heart. I wasn't sure we could pull it off. It is a premier site for very short, very engaging articles on the Bible. You'll find that it talks about it being for the public, but it was a grant that we received from the National Endowment for the Humanities, so it had to be open to the public. But one of the secret sauces of Bible Odyssey is that when I was writing up the style guide, who could write for it, it was really important that scholars think that if they talk slow and loud, they're writing for a larger audience, and they're not. And so there was only a few scholars that could we wanted to be sure that they knew that this was not for each other, their colleagues. It wasn't trying to impress their colleagues. And so we said, you're writing for the public. In the end, it really hit the undergraduate market. And students, there's whole colleges that use Bible Odyssey in their religion program as the only textbook, and because there's so much content there, both articles and videos, everything is short. So it may feel misleading. You say, well, we don't need this material if it's for the public, but it really isn't. In the end, it really serves undergraduates and even master's level. So that is a fantastic site. It's highly visited, 11,000 users a day.
Next slide. All of you probably know, everyone knows Google Scholar. I don't spend a lot of time promoting it because when I first got into this a number of years ago teaching bibliographic research, everyone Googled everything. Trying to learn the major databases to me was really important. In fact, I used to not even list Google Scholar, but it actually has its place. And so next slide. So I put in Baptist Doctrine and Africa, and I got a number of very nice hits. So Google Scholar, but now they're not necessarily open access. I'm just throwing that in there because I know it's very well popular and well used, and it's okay. Okay, next slide. And then I'm not going to go through all of these, but I did a search on free online theological resources, and you'll get these in the Dropbox. But these are just some, and they're from very major places. Dallas Theological is a conservative seminary in the U.S. Covenant Seminary, I think, is Presbyterian, but Westminster. But anyway, next slide. These are just a couple more, but these are just things for you to look at because you might want to, if you're interested in Methodist, Duke is still considered a United Methodist school. Princeton is Presbyterian. Covenant, I think, is Presbyterian. But anyway, these are just options of free materials. And I think when you're doing research, you may be comparing denominational growth among two different Protestant denominations in your country. So these places might have missionary information or church history. Next slide. Okay, now I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Dr. Kutzko has already taken most of my great lines. And but artificial intelligence, AI, it's really one of those things that's a two-edged sword. And we've already talked. I'm so glad that we've heard today. Diana and I were at a conference a few weeks ago where there was a lot of talk about AI and virtually nothing about the dangers. And it can be very useful. But next slide. These are just some of the problems. I'm not going to read through them because you're going to have all this. You can read through them yourself. Next slide. But misuse in academic settings. Plagiarism. You really set your students up for plagiarism because this stuff is all, it's based on plagiarizing a lot of material that's actually, they're not supposed to use. Fake citations, bias. And this is one of the things that in academic settings, there's a bias. You saw those slides that Eric shared earlier, how you ask for an image. It's very Western biased. And so when it's used in Africa and Asia and South America, there is that Western European, North American bias that creeps in and makes another problematic thing. Okay, next slide. And this is one that I really wanted you to notice, is bias in cultural outputs, and one of whom is a religious bias that would be something that would contribute to what I would consider unsound doctrine, because anything that's misleading or wrong, we shouldn't be promoting. Next slide. But you know where I got this information? I asked ChatGPT, what are the problems with ChatGPT? And it actually, there was another slide that I took out. It was medical, because it talked about all the misinformation in medicine that it provides. But AI knows, and it's like Dr. Kutzko was telling us about how it's deliberately generating misinformation, because right now we're in a world where misinformation is considered okay if it suits your political or religious or other biases. Next slide. And then this is just something that actually happened in our country about a month ago. One of the people that's in charge of American health policies put out a report called Make America Healthy Again. And when it was read, it turned out it had been generated by AI, and it had these hallucination, made-up reference notes in it. Next slide. And so if you have any questions, Deanna's going to come and share, and if there's a little bit of time at the end, but that's my email, and if you have some questions, you're welcome to get in touch with me.
Now, I have a brief presentation for you, because we just have 10 more minutes, about strategic planning. And I put out, you've all, I think, have received a copy of this. This is a recent strategic, and it's kind of little, but it's in the Dropbox too. You understand the reference to the Dropbox? I put on the ABTEN WhatsApp page and on the library WhatsApp page, there's a Dropbox link. All of the presentations that we have done today are in that Dropbox, and you can download them and look at them at your leisure, and that includes this. This is a strategic initiative. Strategic planning is a way of formulating where your library is going, evaluating your library, what are the needs, and how can you get from where you are now to where you want to be with regard to those needs. We've done it, I've done it a couple of times. This most recently in March, Maggie and I were in Liberia at the Baptist Seminary in Liberia, which has a lot of library problems. So we went there and we have helped them evaluate and then created a plan for them. This, I don't know if some of you work with the VSI, the Vital Sustainability Initiative, that is from Scholar Leaders International. This is something that they teach. If you create a plan like this, you can present it to donors. You can present it to volunteers who want to come and help in your school. It gives them a roadmap for where you want to go with your library. And then, we've had problems before where maybe your school doesn't have a librarian, and you'll have somebody come from the U.S. or somewhere else and say, oh, let's do this. And then after the first 2 times they come, they never come back again, and you're just kind of left hanging. That has helped, and that has happened a lot of times. But if you have a plan for your library, You know where your issues are and you know where you're going. Now, like this particular document is the one that came out of our Liberia visit in March, and I asked Dr. Masakwai whether we could share it. So this is the document that they're working from right now. And you see, it has 7 strategic initiatives. One of them, the first one, was cataloging and classification of materials. Now, they had a serious problem because they had the bulk of their collection was in the Dewey system, and it had a catalog, a card catalog. But then someone had come in some years ago and reclassified a number of the books in the LC classification system, Library of Congress classification system, and there was no catalog for that. They had not created any access points for it. They just reclassified the books without creating any index or access points for it. And then they get lots of gift books. And so there were all these totally unclassified books there. And so there were really no access points. It was all a hit and miss hunts for what you want kind of thing. Somebody several years ago had come in and reorganized everything in what's called in the library world a bookstore model. That is, they paid no attention to the classification. They just grouped books in general classifications, and they were kind of made up. And the books had no fixed place to be. If it was in pastoral theology today when the student found it, when he brought it back, it would depended on who was putting it back on the shelf, where they put it. So the next time he wanted it, he might not find it in pastoral theology. He might find it in preaching or, somewhere else. It was very random. So that was a big problem. So one of our initiatives was to catalog and classify materials, and we made the decision to go with the LC, and there were some reasons for that. I personally like Dewey better, but there were some reasons why we decided to go with the LC. And then we decided that we needed to prioritize because they have, probably 85% of their collection is 30 years or older. So we didn't want to start reclassifying books with the oldest books. We want to start with the newest books. So we pulled off priorities, and that's what is in here, what we were doing. We decided to create access by putting them online instead of trying to, do card catalogs and all that. But their existing card catalog was in serious disorder because it had been used for odd purposes over the last several years. And so cards have been pulled out and stuffed back in, and it was just a mess. So there was really no access to the collection at all. So we have here some steps that we took to create access, and you can read that. We had the issue of library infrastructure. There were some things about the library that had some serious problems, like there's no librarian's office, and there's no workspace. Everything is just open. And the design of the building was apparently done by someone who's not a librarian. And that is, let me just tell you, you administrators and people like that, don't ever design a library building without the librarian on the committee. Because, even if you get an architect, they want to make things look nice. They are prioritizing form over function. And the librarian knows how the library functions in a different way than the architect does. And so you can tell the architect, you can make it look like anything you want to on the outside, but on the inside it needs to look like this, because this is the way we function. Well, that library building is like that. And it has open windows, not the little louver windows, but the big, flap windows. No screens, no bars, no nothing. And this is a campus that has monkeys. And so the monkeys come in the library. And the new librarian recently, he's been there about 6 months, and he opened the library doors one day, and there were 3 monkeys jumping up and down in the library. And he finds their excrement a lot. in there. There's no way to protect it. So there were lots of infrastructure issues. You can look at this and you can see what some of those infrastructure issues were. And we made a 5-year plan. Well, this is interesting. I see something on here. We made a 5-year plan for how they would address those issues. What needed to be done immediately, what could be wait until a little later, what they would do over the next 5 years. And then I see that, okay, you see there are columns there. There's immediate actions, that's things and then there's a column that says okay at the top, and then it starts saying true, 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 and false, false, false. When you look in the document in the Dropbox, that's like a true and false check box, and when you finish it, you can check it. So where it says true, that means they've done it, and where it says false, that means they haven't done it yet. But if you see it on the website, you'll see that you just put a little check in there. But anyway, okay. So then we had that was 3 was infrastructure. We had technological infrastructure in number 4. Increase in development staff in number 5. We had collection development in number 6. Strengthen and this is printed out a little strangely, but number 6 is strengthen and maintain the collection. And so it's about how to collect and what to do, the funding and all those kind of things. And then the 7th one was digital resources. So what I did was I put a blank copy of this in the Dropbox so that you can create your own strategic initiative. You know more of what is necessary in your library. Not these particular things. These were the things we discovered most important in their library. And so you can see that so you can look there and see that. And we would be glad to talk to you more about this at the Library Talk or anytime. I mean, you can come to Table Talk or anytime you can see us about this.